people would have to spend a fortune just to get off the ground. I mean, doing what we're doing now, you'd be, with your character, people who are open and, you know, they're very expressive. You'd do great on TV, but I mean, you'd have to spend 5 and 10 grand to be on certain segments. It's such a gem today that people can jump onto these platforms and really, for a lot of sweat equity and a few $100, really make it happen and work for them. I heard wine, so I didn't have wine, but I'm grabbing a beer.
Oh, that works. I don't have beer, so I'm grabbing a wine. I'm
Cheers, brother. How are you?
Good, man. Good. It's been we talked about a year ago, and
over a year ago, I think. But, you know, we've corresponded a little bit here and there on LinkedIn and just chatted and kind of caught up. It's cool.
So this is the LinkedIn All-Star podcast, and today we're drinking some Australian Outback wine, courtesy of American Airlines.
Nice. And this is Sierra Nevada Pale Ale.
Ooh, that sounds good.
From Chico, California. Yeah, it's I think the top selling pale ale since 2012 in the US. It's won tons of awards. It's is it the 7th largest brewery overall and the 3rd largest?
I think I filled it up too much.
Ale brewery. Hey, that's all right. That's all good.
Heavy-handed.
Friday afternoon.
Yeah, man. Well, anyways, yeah, this is the LinkedIn All-Star podcast. Thank you for everyone who's joining. And, you know, we'd like to talk about LinkedIn and how people on here on the platform are doing cool and interesting things. And Rob has been on LinkedIn for a long time. And, you know, we've been connected for like 2 years. And it's funny, actually, my fiance, Mary, is actually writing a LinkedIn profile right now. She's started doing ghostwriting for LinkedIn profiles. And, you know, once she kind of got furloughed from American Airlines, you know, had to pivot a little. So, but she's writing a profile for someone who has like a wine, they make wine, they're a winemaker, and they have virtual wine tastings for like corporate events. And so I'm like, you got to look at Rob's profile. Like when I think of wine, I think of Rob. So like whatever you've done through your content, through your messaging, through your headlines, it's proven to work. That, you know, I would recommend Rob as someone to go to look at for like a wine sommelier, beer sommelier, and just, you know, overall good person. So thanks, man.
Hey, thanks, Zach. That's awesome. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah. So anyone listening, let that be a little lesson there, you know, like you don't, you know, and, you know, like when you're in a niche like that, you're not necessarily maybe the biggest, you know, influencer speaking, you know, to everyone, but you got your niche. And, you know, I think another one is Randall, you know, with the food. He does like food on LinkedIn. And so he created a bunch of now company pages, and he shares.
That's awesome.
Like he shares foods based on the state that they come from. So like foods made in New York or foods made in California, and then just frozen foods, food makers like Amazon. Like their grocery stores, like just everything about food. And like for the longest time, he got like no engagement, dude. It was kind of like, but he stuck
and that's really it. Is it's the stickability of the platform, because, you know, unlike other elements of other platforms, I'm not going to shame them because they all have their benefits. I mean, but it's LinkedIn is one specific one, and I'm sure you can agree with this. It's because there's a lot of high-end professionals and a lot of high-end brain power consistently on it. A lot of very keen business people. A lot of people don't mess around, and they want to test the water to see if you're legitimate or not. It's one of those that you can't just come out with a flashy image. Like Instagram, for instance, is great for that. You come out with a beautiful image, you can leverage it right away. And that's the magic of that platform. But with LinkedIn, you really have to build up the relationships over time. And if you don't have that rapport or the relationships, it's just going to go nowhere.
Yeah. But I'm happy to report that like within the last few months, maybe due to COVID or just the algorithm, seeing that consistency, it started to snowball. And now he went from like 15,000 followers to like over 30,000 in a few short months.
Wow. That's like
post
double
went
where
from
I'm
like
at. That's awesome.
200 or 300 views or engagements like per post to like 1,000. So like it just, and it's like, wow, you know, I've known Randall for like 2 years, and Yeah, I remember talking with him back in the day when I was like, still figuring things out for myself, and we were on a call just supporting each other, just like how very much like how you and I
Yeah,
jumped on
yeah,
a
yeah,
call.
yeah, for sure.
And
For sure.
you're right though, that the relationship is now how we're meeting up again, and that's how you are top of mind for being on wine. So I think phone calls
Yeah,
are
and I
really
think,
important.
and it's true. And I think about too, even when you shifted gears to real estate, I love the videos. Like the way that you started doing the videos, you brought that same passion, enthusiasm that you always have with your content, but it got specific into a cool subject because everyone loves housing as well. I mean, no
Yeah.
one's going to look at a house and go, "Oh my God, I don't want to look at that." It's not like a stock report of a company. I mean, you're showcasing some pristine properties, and there's a huge market for it. In the traditional sense of realty, is to make those cold calls, sales calls, put signs up everywhere. If we can really go back, and just hope that you try to traffic customers in where what you've done with the content and video, it already invites me in the house. And I just think of like the impact that the platform of LinkedIn can have. It's magical. And I mean, in your case too, you've leveraged it really, really well. I mean, you're making strides and gains that, from what I've seen, that people they would take 3 to 5 years any other way. You've done it all within a very impactful year. I think it's amazing.
It's funny because like this was the year that I decided to like kind of take a little bit of a hiatus from focusing on just being a LinkedIn influencer that was kind of known by everyone, to niching down into real estate. And it proved to work that I was able to get my license, and within a few short months able to secure my first contract, which already put me into like the top 20% of agents that fail within the first year. So that was good. And LinkedIn was able, and during COVID, but it was the relationships that I had built already on LinkedIn that they're like, I'm buying in Phoenix, I wouldn't use anyone else but you.
Yeah, and it's amazing because you think print media, or we go back, I'm a bit older than you, but we go back and we think past earlier than 2000, for instance, even like into 1995 when the internet was really rudimentary. People would have to spend a fortune just to get off the ground. I mean, doing what we're doing now, you'd be, with your character, people who are open and they're very expressive, you'd do great on TV, but I mean, you'd have to spend 5 and 10 grand to be on certain segments. You'd be invited on community TV, you could leverage that, but then you would still have to get a hold of the video and somehow market it and brand it. And then you had all the print media that still existed. It's such a gem today that people can jump onto these platforms and really, for a lot of sweat equity and a few $100, really make it happen and work for them.
Yeah. So why don't we take a step back and
yeah, sure,
share your story about how you got into this field, and when did you decide that you were gonna take your career and market and position yourself as that beer and wine sommelier on LinkedIn, and how did that story go?
Well, I was, my background is quite varied, but I spent a considerable amount of time in the cruise line industry, and I was an assistant cruise director. In the traditional sense, I was second in charge of the whole entertainment department. So getting my foot into entertainment opened my head up about presenting. So I always had a door into hospitality. And I did that for the better part of 9 years, and I got out and I went into the IT world for 5 years, which is something completely different. And at the end of it, I'd been burned a couple times. I'd actually launched a business that was thriving for the past year and a half, but a crooked partner had undermined a lot of people, including myself. We all lost a lot of money. So I got out of that, and I was at my dad's house one night, and I was really, really set at doing my project management professional because it all tied in, right? And there's something like, hey, well, if I have that, but deep down, I wasn't really passionate about it. I knew I could do really well with it because I knew the field, and by being involved in so many projects, I learned a ton about project management. But I'm sitting there one night, and the backstory of this is I grew up with my dad making wine and beer prolifically all the time. And he had volumes of books on beer and wine. And he'd always read about it. It was his passion on the side. He was a military man, so he was in the Navy. So I just thinking sailors drinking rum, that probably is the path that carried him through it all. But he sat here one night and he looked at me and he said, Rob, and it's the first time I listened to him, he said, you could do your project management professional, but that's going to turn into a dime a dozen. And at the time, it truly was. A lot of people were trying to squeeze on it because if you had any skill sets, you could make $800, $1,000 a day contracting yourself out. So the money lured people, like all kinds of people, out of the sea into this pond. Well, he looked at me and said, why don't you study wine? So I had a side job at the time at the Marriott Hotel here in Ottawa, and I still actually do have
you could
that
make
job.
800 to 1,000 a day. Like you could make over
As a
like
project management professional.
100 plus an hour, 125 an hour.
You could at the time. Now it's dropped down, but at the time it was in such high demand. So, but the demand was slowly getting squeezed.
Well, you thought long term.
Right. So I decided to pursue the wine studies instead. And then I jumped through the WSET, which is out of England, which is the oldest school. It's linked to the guilds of 1353. It's called the Wine Spirit Education Trust out of London, England. Most of your masters of wine, that's the highest end of the wine education world, come from the WSET and end up doing their diploma, and then they usually get invited into the Institute of the Masters of Wine if they had really high grades and they're very good. It's the academic footprint. It's not the business footprint. But on the academic footprint, that's the highest order. So I started doing these courses and I started getting passionate about it. In the beginning, I really knew nothing about wine. My wine teacher at the time used to joke with me thinking, and he said, everything in red wine and Italian seems to taste like olives and tomatoes to you. And my palate was terrible. It was something I had to work on, but I grew into it. And I'm really glad I did because, my father had said to me, he said, your industry is an industry of the future because in Canada, it's exploding. Outside of California and the States, it's exploding. I mean, you have wineries in Texas now. Who would have thought of that 30 or 40 years ago? So then I just gravitated to beer over time. I got into the field, I got into the event structure, and wine has this mystique about it. But we forget that 76% of alcohol consumption is beer. It's what's in this glass, beer. 76% of North Americans, that is the drink of choice. Yeah. Wine sits around 20, and spirits have traditionally hovered at around 5. So I decided,
quick question.
Yeah.
Is that alcohol content adjusted?
No, by volume of sales. If you took a look at macroeconomics, just worldwide, beer consumption is by far the most common alcoholic beverage out there. By sales and volume. Oh yeah, it's huge. So I went in and I just figured out, I said, you know what? I'm getting hammered all the time about beer, and I really don't know much about beer at all. In fact, I could tell you about an ale and a lager, and that is it. So I jumped into the beer studies to round it out. And then I went out on my own and I steadily built it up. And I can tell you one of the biggest things that has helped me, on top of having a media background, having done TV spots prior, but to anybody listening to this podcast, I would say, take a chance on LinkedIn. A lot of people, I still have friends who think the platform is a resume platform like it was 12 years ago, but it's not. The integration in this platform is huge now. In fact, you can have live chats. You can put up your Zoomcast, podcasts. You can shoot video live. You can shoot video, edit it, and put it up through a YouTube channel. There's so many ways to reach and engage now that it really is, in my mind, perhaps the best social media platform for business growers and influencers out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. LinkedIn Stories is another way that they're adding engagement to the platform. I just talked with last week's episode was with Nathaniel Bibby from Down Under, a LinkedIn marketer, and they have on Down Under, Australia and UAE, they have LinkedIn Stories, but we can't see their stories, but it's going to roll out soon. And then I think that'll be really cool to be more authentic and real. Because I think a few years ago when LinkedIn video first came out, authentic and like cell phone video and just raw, real content was really in. But I am seeing now that more people are coming into the platform that there's a little bit more emphasis on production value. Would you agree with that?
I would. I think in the past, I remember even all of us doing our first sets of videos, really. I mean, LinkedIn video, really, when I came into the platform heavy on it, I was, in 2017, I think that's really when the video year was huge on LinkedIn into 2018. And you're right, everybody had iPhone 6s or 6Ss or S7s at the time, and we were shooting video. You watch guys like Quinton Allums, they were more sophisticated with their A7 mirrorless Sony cameras and things like that. And they were ahead of the curve, but the bulk of us were just even trying to figure out how to caption. And if you remember, how do I write a caption on this so that people who can't watch it with sound can actually know what's going on? And now it's true. I mean, some of the quality videos that are coming up, it's like a mini movie that comes up for a minute or two on your channel. And it's great to see. It's just cool to see the evolution. And you're talking about LinkedIn stories, man. I hope that gets here, because that sounds like some really exciting stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's your game plan for the rest of this year?
Well, I've developed, you talked about virtual tastings. One of the things I really focused on was switching the event structure. I used to do a fair bit of events here in Ottawa. And obviously that whole scene is gone with COVID. I mean, to get 10 people or more in a room is a risky bet now. So virtual, and I've kicked it off. For instance, last night I had a great virtual tasting on beer with a financial company just outside of outside of Philadelphia. And these are things that, they reached out to me through LinkedIn, took a chance on me. It went really well. So I'm really, really happy about that. They were very, very happy with the deliverable. And you think, going back to this whole discussion on how LinkedIn can really affect you, this is something that really lifted up and moved the business forward for me. And this is, and in a sense, and the irony is, in the reverse case of what's happened for me is the pandemic has actually helped lift my business a bit, because I'm not in brick and mortar like yourself in a sense. We're mobile, and anybody that wants to be a solopreneur or an agile entrepreneur, this is a great time to really hone the skills and learn how to do that, because I don't think we're going to ever encounter something like this in our lifetime again. This is a like every 4 generation or 5 generations type of thing. Pandemics like this come out and hit the planet. And it has been a game changer in the sense that those that have been chipped in or clicked in have been able to switch gears rather quickly.
Yeah. We're well positioned to take advantage of the digital shift. And I was sharing with you today that, well, real quick, congratulations. And I'm excited for that event that has gone well. And your business doing well. So that's awesome to hear.
Thank you.
So I'll share a quick story about my own event that I did today for a client. And
yeah, you had an event that went on for a few hours before this call. Yeah. And that sounds cool.
It was like the first time kind of doing something like that at a high ticket offer where, we've done like free webinars and we have like a low ticket monthly kind of membership, but this one was like a $1,000 price point, and 4 hours over Zoom, and we got like 16 people to register. So it brought in a significant amount of revenue for my client. And naturally he's like, if I get 5 to 10 people, like he didn't think anyone would buy it, first of all. So I had to convince my client that this is something that they should do. And that he has the knowledge, right? He has 5,000 YouTube subscribers that he and I have built over the last 2 years working together.
Good for you. That's significant.
So that organic platform was how we were able to, have that audience to launch that mastermind. But just taking the confidence to do it in the first place really took a lot of growth on my own part, and then also me coaching my client to do that. And it went really well. Everyone, I guess we'll see in the coming days as the feedback comes in, as we send out a survey. But yeah, I think it went really well for the first time. And you really have to rewire your brain in the way that it thinks for the digital era. Would you agree?
I do, but I think, also in the case of yourself, I mean, I've been following you for a while, and you've always had strong content, strong enthusiasm with it. And being able to cultivate that, and you used LinkedIn to cultivate that, and obviously through growth and maturation over time for all of us, we all experience that. You were able to parlay this into a project or an initiative that actually ended up doing really well. And this is because the background work had been done already, and the fact that, think of the countless hours you've spent interviewing people, podcasts, shooting video, your Jeff Larson impersonation, which I love to this day, by the way. But it's just, and there's another guy who's just terrific at moving and shaking, just telling you stories from a car lot that he works in. It's the fact that I'm not surprised, because you were able to take all these skill sets and put them together into something that was very deliverable and tangible for somebody to help them move forward.
Thanks, man. Yeah. So
that's awesome.
But now that I shared about my event, I want to learn more about your event and virtual wine tastings, because I was talking with Mary about it, and I was trying to understand, okay, this client that she was writing the resume, or the LinkedIn profile for, she's in this healthcare space, and then she got a doctorate degree, and then she went into winemaking, and her husband have a pharmaceutical analytics type of company.
That's cool.
They work together in the sense that they do wine tastings for healthcare events. And I imagine there's probably some business development side on that on the back end, but
sure, absolutely. But I mean, just the initial concept itself, because she's already entrenched in a platform, she's obviously a high-end, somebody with a PhD into healthcare and health sciences. It's no laughing matter. I mean, that's right at the pinnacle of education, or you can't really go much further than that. But to parlay that into her passion for wine, and then get into winemaking, which winemaking is very intellectual. I mean, it's a science. These are actual true on scientific courses to learn how to make wine. You learn about agriculture, biology, chemistry, physics gets involved. But for her to be able to do that, one of the things that she could focus on is just customizing her own wine and putting it on a platform for tasting, and she could talk to healthcare professionals about it, and then you can actually promote the health benefits of wine, which we know, resveratrol, for instance, and proanthocyanidins and things like this that are very good for your health are found, predominantly in certain red wines. And if she's manufacturing or producing or making these wines, then she could easily turn around and just host her own tasting sessions.
Yeah.
Which, you take the tasting room and make it virtual. I think this is fantastic. And this is the way things have to go. Yeah. It's not just, if you think about it, even when we get back to good times and people can just walk into a winery, walk into the tasting room, you're still only getting the reach of those in your tasting room. But if you present it and parlay it in a way where you have a featured tasting, and you could ship your product out to different corners of the States and Canada or into England, you get international. You can have like a global event going on with the tastings of your specific wine. I mean, the applications to this are huge.
Yeah, that global wine tasting event would be amazing. But my question is, I guess I was trying to understand, okay, what is the end effect of having a corporate wine tasting event? Like, when let's say I own a healthcare organization and I want to have a team event, and I want to spice it up. Obviously, what is the end result of going? Why am I going to fork over the money to do a virtual wine tasting for my team? It's not like, is it team building? Is it learning?
It is. It would also in the end be morale, engagement, and retention. Because, if you have happy people, if they're working really hard and they're plugging through things, and this is really the way I discuss it and sell it, because it really does have that effect. You think about it, you put a beer in your hand, like we sat down at the beginning, I grabbed the beer, you grab the glass of wine, and we're instantly kind of happy right away, and you think the joy it brings. Well, especially in a trying period of COVID, where you're seeing people getting furloughed or laid off, you're seeing downsizing, bankruptcies, you're seeing some economic chaos happening from this. The people that you still have and the people that you still have on your team work really, really, really hard. And one thing we know as business owners is those that invest into us underneath, that trust us, that we employ or we contract out, you have to treat them well. Otherwise, how are you going to keep them? Especially if they're really, really good. Mm-hmm. And one way to keep it is events. Events have always made people happy. I mean, that's why people have the holiday or the Christmas party or the Thanksgiving gala or a sporting event, the Super Bowl parties and things like this. Well, You can't really do that, but what you can't do that right now, but what you can keep alive are activities like wine and beer and say spirits tasting, because you can use Zoom, you can get a business account. I think you can have like 40 or 50 people on with you. So you could actually have, and what would fill up a small ballroom in a hotel watching you live virtually at the comfort of their own home. They have the security of their own home. They're engaged. They're now getting the human interaction that they've been missing. The company is recognizing it by throwing on the event. So automatically the morale's higher because people go, wow, you actually invested in this and it went really well. Not only we learned stuff, but we had a really good time with the host, the person hosting it. And the effects of that are huge. Because you think about it, if I'm happier and I'm more engaged and occasionally I get some recognition or appreciation, I go to work the next day with a totally different mindset. In fact, it sets me up for success for probably the next 30 to 90 days. Easily after that, I'm playing at a higher level. Just because I feel that you looked after me, you care, you reached out. And
That's
especially reached out at a time like a pandemic where there's still lockdown measures, people are isolated. Some people can't even see their own family in a different state. I know that's the same here in Canada. Depending on what province you're in and what province you're living in, as opposed to some family members in other provinces, you can't even fly out and see them right now.
Yeah.
So this keeps the glue together and the heartbeat going. And it's ever more important now to be creative on the event side, the event structure, to keep that morale ticking, especially now with people working remote. I mean, they're not even interacting in their own offices.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes total sense. I mean, just a small tick in percentage of everyone's efficiency across the board and morale boost. It's one of those things like you invest in the wine tasting event without an immediate expectation on return. There's no necessarily agenda. So someone would hire you. Would you be leading the event? Like you'd be
Yes, I often do lead the event.
And
so I know firsthand at the end of them. Well, I mean, usually what you do is you guide through a little bit of history and fun facts, particularly in wine and beer. There's just so many of them and so much to cover because, I mean, beer and wine are tied right to the root of the growth of civilization. You think about it with beer, it spurred an agricultural revolution. We went from human, the hunter-gatherers to food gatherers and cultivating grains. And because of cultivating grains, I mean, beer became a major production center or a item to produce that you could build your economy on. You could sell to other empires and other channels. So the effects are huge. You get into discussions like that, then you talk about the history of the backstory, because there's always these really cool backstories on wineries and the breweries that you're presenting. And then you get into the actual tasting. And when you think about it, each step of the way the people are engaged, because they're going to ask you questions, you invite the question to be asked. And then when you're talking about the actual tasting, what notes do you find in that glass of beer, a glass of wine? You know, it gets expressive, and then everybody sort of has a little bit of a different beat to it. And it gets everyone together to discuss things, which is cool. There's my cat here. Sorry about that. She likes to
that's sometimes. Cool. She wants to say hi. So,
that's Jojo. Jojo, say hi to the world.
Awesome. So who are you finding that are, who is your target customer first, and how are you using LinkedIn to help reach those clients?
Well, target customers vary. I mean, one thing about wine and beer, it's like real estate investing in your end. It hits every vertical. You think about it, everybody has an interest in a house or a home or a property or an upgrade or a downgrade or an upsize or a renovation. Well, unless people have an aversion to alcohol or their religious beliefs bar it, and that does happen, or they're recovering from addiction and don't want to touch it, and that's the last, and I respect all of these views. But the reach, generally speaking, reaches very far and very wide. And it's something that, most business owners and senior managers of large companies and firms usually have vested interests in these things. And when you find out, a lot of them have wine collections of their own or whiskey and scotch collections. So just the base product alone it opens the door, because they said everybody thinks about the spirits or the alcohol world and they go, wow, that brings a bit of joy and happiness. And that opens the door to invite it. Now with LinkedIn, I mean, I've used it to promote videos, to talk about specific styles of wine or specific wineries. I did that with COVID, to really focused on Ontario and the Ontario region during the lockdown. And then I've reached out and since expanded upon it. So we're getting into educational themes. I have chats with Jennifer Simonati Bryan, a good friend of mine who's a master of wine in Los Angeles. And she's just brilliant in the wine world and an absolute authority. So you get into these discussions, and you get into discussions of things like AI and artificial intelligence. What it does is it creates a web or a net that people can follow that's relatable. It relates to your story, relates to the field that you're in, and it gains interest and momentum. And then you will have people reach out to you. And I'm sure you've had people reach out to you now saying, Zach, can you create some content for me? Can you help me out with this? Or listen, I see that you're in Arizona promoting houses. I'm interested in moving there, Ryan. I'm looking at some of the neighborhoods you were showcasing, all because it was presented on a video platform like LinkedIn.
Right. So yeah, just putting yourself out there. One thing I want to ask is, have you done any targeting searches for people that have beer or wine in their LinkedIn profiles to maybe make a connection there?
Admittedly, not a whole lot. And I know you can do it. Sounds sad that I haven't done it, but that is definitely a tool that you can use. What happens often is people just approach me and then they hit you up or start a conversation and they say, hey, listen, I've got a wine collection, or my wife loves Napa Cab Sauves, or my husband's into Indian Pale Ales. Do you have any recommendations, or what's your thought on it? Or do you know of styles that are similar that we can explore? And you get hit with all angles, and naturally what happens is you automatically know that they have an interest in what you're doing and covering just by the questions that they're asking and the engagement that comes off from it.
Awesome. Yeah.
But you're right though. I mean, another way, I am part of certain groups like, wine importers and distributors, or part of food and beverage groups, or hospitality and hotel groups. And I do target those sometimes, where you put in a feed or a message, but I find the best way is just to grow it organically and to foster it organically. I know there are people who are in engagement pods and things like that. I mean, if that works for you, that's awesome. It's just not the approach I've ever taken. And like yourself, we tend to like growing things organically because you can scale it and build it, and you can see exactly where it's headed.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that. I personally haven't been in any engagement pods, but I think for the very first 2.5 years of my LinkedIn journey, I very much relied purely on inbound opportunities. But I would encourage you to implement, even if your business is, growing and you're satisfied, I would try to implement a little bit of outbound into your strategy, and look at it not in the sense that you're doing sales or, you're just pitching people. But I think if you do a little bit of work and adding 5 to 10 new connections a day, that you have that wine, that keyword that you're able to relate with them, and just send them a message. Hey, I saw you are also a wine, enthusiast like myself. I would love to connect. And I think that would.
No, you're right. And I have done that. I mean, I just don't really expressively talk about it, but I've also reached out to people and just messaged them saying, hey, listen, let's connect. I see that we really have a lot in common, and we've got a lot that we could discuss. Yeah. And that does work. The other thing, if you want to really go outbound, is, email people directly, because it's powerful. Everyone checks their email still. Yeah. Or make a phone call, because it's foreign now. Everybody wants to text instead, or FaceTime or whatnot. Just make a phone call to people once you connect with them. Say, listen, can we have a chat offline? And then before we get into a Zoom call or whatnot. And it's about establishing the various steps of rapport in an outbound fashion. I mean, you're 100% right. Outbound is really important. And it is something I still use because awesome. I came from the days of cold calling. The DEI sales course where you got legends. Well, if this person rejects you and throws this question out, this is how you capture it and turn it back into a discussion. And some of that still applies. I wouldn't say I would totally recommend just going out and cold calling on Blitz now. That you're going to get hung up a lot, and there's a lot of call blocking now that's happening, and you could probably be charged in some states, and I know you can in some cities and provinces now in Canada. But it's definitely a strategy that you should always have in your sleeve.
Yeah.
I wholeheartedly agree with you.
Yeah, that's good. And, you know, especially as video content creators, we tend to focus more on the inbound, but that is something that I myself am focusing more on now is, yeah, as much as I want to be like, oh, I don't want to bug people, it is something that if I believe in my own mission, then it's worth it enough to put in the work to intentionally connect with people that I know would value, you know, that there's a valuable connection there both ways. And also that LinkedIn is different than any other social media platform in that you get to choose who is in your network, whereas Instagram or YouTube, it's only one way. People themselves 100% get to choose who they follow and subscribe to. But in LinkedIn, you have an opportunity to invite them to connect. And I think everyone should, you know, take advantage of that. So that's awesome that you are doing that as well too. So
yeah, I mean, what about yourself? I mean, how's things going on your end? I see the milestones you're starting to hit off on
yes,
sales,
yeah.
which I think is
So
pretty excellent.
I've kind of come back full circle, and I'm focusing more now again on LinkedIn. So I'm still going to be a real estate agent, but that's going to take a secondary seat to my LinkedIn coaching business, where I'm helping other business owners and entrepreneurs that want to, you know, get started on this platform and, you know, set themselves up for success. So that is kind of like
Fantastic.
and really just focusing on LinkedIn education. I started a new YouTube channel for the LinkedIn All-Star
cool.
Academy. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like it's one of those daunting things that like start a new YouTube channel, but you know, I think we got like 3 subscribers now. So
yeah, I think I'm at 100 and I can relate. I'm at like 117 in my channel. I've been actively pushing since April or something like this because
awesome.
it can still, well, they can still watch it directly. The challenge for us off LinkedIn is they can still watch it off LinkedIn without going right to your YouTube channel. It's not like other platforms. So they actually have to hit the thing. It opens up and then they view it.
What I'm finding
is it's a steady growth. I mean,
YouTube is much better than LinkedIn, I will say, for a organic reach platform where if you, because of the search engine optimization, for example, my client, when COVID hit, we didn't post any, like we had to put a hiatus on our content schedule just because we weren't able to meet in person to shoot until we were able to kind of figure out an alternative. We didn't post videos to YouTube for like 3 months, but their YouTube channel still was gaining subscribers every month and gaining views every month.
That's awesome.
Whereas LinkedIn, if you stop posting, your views will very quickly tank. So I think that is one thing that YouTube, it's harder to get traction on initially, but if you stay with it and you can hit that exponential growth rate, it's a great platform, and combining the two really complement each other.
And that's what I'm finding. You're right. I mean, I found the LinkedIn, or not the LinkedIn, but the YouTube channel is a steady grow, slow grow. It's slow and go. You know, you put up a new video, you get 3 or 4 new subscribers.
Yeah.
And then over the week or two, you're right, because they can go into your library or catalog now, and they can go through it like a Netflix channel and start picking out the videos they want to watch and the content they want to see. They start telling friends about it, or they say, hey, look, watch Zach. He's talking about housing in his walkthrough. He's talking about how to create excellent content on LinkedIn. We want to get into this platform. And trust me, there's a massive need for it. So I think what you're doing is awesome. It's it pulls them in. And you're right, as your LinkedIn numbers can drop, they can rise. But what I find by using them together is both numbers actually increase steadily over time.
And YouTube is the perfect place to create like your pillar content, and then chop that down into micro content for LinkedIn. But we're coming up.
That's true.
We went a little long here, but I wanted to keep this like I used to have a podcast, the Zach Scriven podcast, and I did like
I remember that.
140 episodes of that. And hey man, this year has been a big growth year for me. Like I realized I was approaching LinkedIn the whole wrong way, and I was kind of more focused on how LinkedIn could benefit me rather than how I could show up to LinkedIn to benefit others.
And that's fair to say. I think most of us step into that path at some point. You know, in the beginning, I was like, great, how can I boom the drunken grape? And now I'm thinking, how can I help others maximize themselves, which will then in turn maximize me? And it
Absolutely.
really makes a huge difference when you spin it around. I mean, and you know, that you can put up things like the Friday feature, which I've done, where I feature one person a week as a superstar. Jay Andrews, I have to give credit to for really being he's a good friend of mine from the city. We both live in the same city together. And I can really give him, he's awesome. I can give him huge credit for starting that whole movement with the Fantastic Four on Fridays.
Yeah.
But
How do I
this
get his
give back
attention enough
culture.
to be on that, by the way? It seems like he goes through so many people that surely by now I would have been on it, but how do
Have you ever
reach?
talked to him or reached out to him directly?
I feel like I might have, but not like to be like, oh, why aren't I on the Fantastic Four? But like,
You deserve to be in the Fantastic
well,
Four.
thanks, man. But no, but
For everything you've done,
not making
you really
it about
do
me.
deserve to be.
He has done a great job, and as soon as you said Jay Andrews, I knew Fantastic Four, and he has this coffee cup, you know. But
A Superman coffee cup on his
Yeah.
runs and stuff through the week.
but yeah, I think you're right. I think, you know, like you said, if I was more focused on me, then maybe that was the result of that. But if I was more focused on how I could help him, or how I can help you, how I can help others, like that's why I kind of, I don't know, like I may still pick up the Zach Scriven podcast later on or whatever, but right now I'm focusing on LinkedIn All-Star Academy, LinkedIn All-Star podcast, helping, you know, grow the LinkedIn All-Star YouTube channel. So yeah, man, thanks so much for being a part of it.
Hey, thank you very much, man. That's awesome.
Where'd you get that shirt?
I bought it at Marshall's for like $9. I know, it's retro.
So you had one of those consoles?
I didn't directly as a kid, but all my friends did. I think we jumped in as a family into the next version, which might have been in Television or ColecoVision or something like that. But yeah, I know I gamed a lot on the Atari 2600 back in the day when I was like a 7-year-old kid. So, you know, you're sitting there with Galaga or Pac-Man or the ping pong game, the two they basically look like two blocks moving back and forth with a ball crossing, and you're trying to score on each other. But yeah, it's a legendary and epic, it's an epic game system.
Awesome. All right, Rob, thank you for being on the LinkedIn
Zach,
All-Star
cheers.
podcast.
Thank you very much, brother, and keep doing good things. This is definitely needed in the environment.
How can people reach you?
Well, they can reach me directly on LinkedIn, or they can just email me at rob@thedrunkengrape.com. You can message me. I do have my website up. On the website, it's info@thedrunkengrape.com. So it's pretty easy. If they put in a search for The Drunken Grape, I'm going to come up pretty readily. So there's the website there and everything else. So yeah, no, it's any which way they choose to.
Awesome. And thank you guys for listening to this episode of LinkedIn All-Star Podcast. We'll see you guys in the next one.